Hey, let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a situation thinking you're ready, only to realize you're way out of your depth? That's exactly what happened to SEAL Team 2 when they landed in the Mekong Delta in '67. They expected jungle warfare. What they got was rice paddies, murky canals, and a war that didn't play by anyone else's rules. There was no backup, just mud, chaos, and a whole lot of figure it out. Sound familiar? Maybe not the battlefield part, but the feeling. Yeah, that's life. Let me tell you right now, this talk is about mindset and resilience, not the pretty Instagram quote version. I'm talking about the real kind, the kind that shows up when everything goes sideways and you've got two options, fold or fight through. And the good news, you've got it in you. You might not know it yet, but I promise it's there. Let's break it down. Mindset is a story you tell yourself when things get hard. Resilience is how you act on that story. That's it, simple, but not always easy. See, mindset isn't about being positive all the time. That's not real life. It's about perspective. It's about asking what now instead of why me. And resilience, that's not about never failing. It's about getting up, even if you've got to crawl. Let me give you a few real-world stories. Before it became a global tech icon, Nokia was just a lumber mill in a small Finnish town most Americans couldn't pronounce. By the mid-1980s, the company's biggest accomplishments, including supplying toilet paper to Ireland and making studded bike tires, hardly the stuff of Silicon Valley dreams. But Nokia's real story, the one worth telling, isn't about gadgets. It's about resilience. In the late 80s, Nokia was in freefall. Their CEO, battling depression, took his own life. The Soviet Union, Finland's main trading partner, collapsed, taking much of Nokia's traditional business with it. Investors were frustrated. Management considered selling off the small, struggling mobile phone division to stop the bleeding. That might have been the end, if not for one man, Jorma Ollila, a quiet but sharp Finnish banker turned executive. Ollila saw something others didn't. He took over the mobile phone division in 1990 and was given 6 months to save or scrap it. Within 4, he made his call, keep it. What followed wasn't just a pivot, it was a total reinvention. Nokia bet everything on mobile phones and on new digital network called GSM. It was a gamble. The tech was messy, the market was unproven. But Ollila believed that someday mobile phones would be as common as keys or wallets. He was right. By the late 90s, Nokia wasn't just surviving, it was leading. It became the world's #1 phone maker. Its stock skyrocketed 2,000%. The brand was ranked alongside Coca-Cola and Microsoft. In Finland, people call their phones kännykkä, an extension of the hand. But again, the market shifted. New players like Samsung, LG, and eventually Apple showed up. Nokia's dominance slipped. Their share price dropped. Critics said they were finished. Still, Nokia didn't fold. Instead, it adapted, diverted. It built new tech, and it reminded the world of something the Finns have always known. In a cold climate, you survive by being flexible. You move, you shift. You don't cling on to the past. You build. What's next? That's resilience. And listen up, when SEAL Team 2 landed in the Mekong Delta in January '67, they weren't expecting what hit them. They came fresh out of Little Creek, loaded with bravado, ready for jungle combat, but instead of thick jungle and ranging firefights, they got rice paddies, endless wet, muddy rice paddies. Canals so tangled and confusing that it might have been easier to fight in the jungle if the jungle was what they had gotten. The Navy had this grand vision: control the waterways, choke off the enemy's movement and pacify the whole damn region. But in reality, these SEALs were the only American military presence there. There was no Delta Force to back them up, just a handful of sailors knee-deep in blackish water and red tape trying to fight an insurgency that wasn't interested in fighting by the rules. Chief Bob Gallagher, known as Tough as Nails SEAL, who loved close quarters chaos, was the guy who whipped them into shape. But sometimes the enemy was so close enough that you could smell his breath. Or maybe that was just the fish sauce drifting over the canals. They staged out of Bin Tui, a place that looked beautiful from the air with rice paddies, thick tree lines stretching for miles, but underneath was a surreal, savage war. The SEALs learned to ambush like pros, waiting in the shadows for the Viet Cong to show their faces, rolling the dice every time. Then there were the tides. One night in the so-called Long Tuan secret zone, a name that probably made those SEALs want to laugh and cry at once, the ground beneath them started moving. The Mekong Delta tide didn't creep up quietly. It surged back like a drunk buffalo, sweeping boots downstream and sending their radios in panic mode. Still, they got hits. The waterways, once ruled by the Viet Cong, became death traps. They weren't just fighting soldiers. They were stealing the night from the enemy. But when Tet 68 came, things went off the rails. The VC launched massive assaults everywhere. Even Saigon shook. But these SEALs kept operating in the shadows, teaming up with local PRU units, some of whom had been VC themselves, and fighting with ruthless efficiency. They even worked with local fishermen who knew the jungle like the back of their hand to raid huge weapon caches. But as the war dragged on, the bigger fight wasn't just against the Viet Cong, it was against the military bureaucracy that slowed missions and sometimes got people killed. The Joint Resolution Centre tried to control rescue ops with paperwork while lives hung in the balance. SEALs learned to trust local intel and ignore the suits in Saigon. The enemy was more than just the guy with the gun. It was the whole system, the fear, the control, the never-ending regeneration of the Viet Cong. The Phoenix program tried to go after that head, but it was always too little, too late. By 1971, the SEALs were pulled out, not because they were losing, far from it, but because the people calling the shots back home wanted out. Nixon declared victory and closed the book on their chapter. But the war never left those SEALs. Some went on to strange new missions around the world, always carrying the weight of the Delta with them. The mud, the chaos, the sense that no one really wins a war like that. So here's the truth, straight from the river rats and rice fields. The Mekong Delta War wasn't about glory. It was about survival, grit, and a stubborn refusal to back down. They didn't win. Nobody did. But they fought like hell and took away the night, even if only for a little while. And over in Australia, when World War II broke out, Sydney wasn't the sun-soaked, easygoing city many Americans picture today. Nah, it was fractured, torn by a class conflict and a mistrust of authority, and still carrying the convict legacy that shaped it from the start. You know, they say Britain got so fed up with its convicts that when they couldn't send them to America anymore, they just shipped them all to Australia. Basically, Australians became the world's first out-of-office reply for criminals. Sorry, we're full, try down under. But here's the thing, that rough start didn't break Sydney. It made the city resilient, tough, ready for whatever came next. As late as 1946, Australian judges could legally sentence someone to a public flogging and occasionally threaten to. The police weren't trusted either. One article in the Sydney Morning Herald described bystanders openly mocking police officers as they wrestled armed suspects to the ground. But Sydney didn't fall apart. It adapted. Beneath the tension, the dysfunction was a quiet kind of toughness, not the Hollywood kind, something grittier, more patient, resilient. You can see it in our literature. As scholar Stephen Knight pointed out, Australian crime fiction has long been obsessed with the underdog, not the cool, suave criminal, but the small-time struggler who gets by in an unfair world. He's not glamorous. He's not even likeable, but he hangs in. Where American or French stories might celebrate a rebel or an outlaw, Australians often side with the guy who's just trying to survive, the one who keeps getting knocked down and keeps getting up anyway. It's not heroism in the traditional sense. It's a kind of everyday resilience shaped by hardship, suspicious of authority and always aware that life isn't fair, but we get through it. That's a big part of what made Sydney and Australia what it is today. There was a time in Sydney not so long ago when asking for help didn't mean getting it. People would call the New South Wales Police looking for protection or justice, only to be brushed aside or redirected to mental health services, labelled as unstable or crazy. Even when friends tried to intervene, their concerns were dismissed. When systems that are supposed to protect you stop listening, something shifts inside. You begin to realise resilience is no longer optional, it's survival. level. And then came a moment no one expected, a turning point led by one of the most influential figures of our time, the American Jeff Bezos. Yes, that Jeff Bezos, the tech titan, founder of Amazon, a man often compared to a force of nature or even God in how he moves markets and bends systems. When his company Mark 43 entered a $177.8 million agreement to upgrade the Australian New South Wales outdated tech infrastructure, it was supposed to be a leap into the future. But when the contract was abruptly cancelled, Bezos didn't walk away. He sued, and in doing so, he did something profound for the Australian people. He held the system accountable. To some, it was just a corporate dispute, but to others watching from the outside, it was symbolic. It was as if someone finally stood up to the power that had silenced them. It was as if someone said, the rules apply to you too. Basically, Jeff Bezos in Australia is like God. This wasn't about business. It was a reminder. Resilience sometimes looks like being willing to fight back, not with fists, but with facts, with fire, and with faith in the system's promise to be better. What this means for you, when you're ignored, mislabeled, or dismissed, it chips away at your identity. You start to question your worth, your sanity, your place in the world. But resilience is born in those moments. It's what you build when the system shuts its doors and you find the courage to keep knocking anyway. It's not just about bouncing back, it's about rising stronger. It's about standing up even when no one's clapping. It's about knowing whether you're a billionaire in a courtroom or a citizen just trying to be heard. Your voice matters. If you've ever felt broken by life, left out by the system, or pushed down by the very people meant to protect you, remember, you're not crazy. You're just being called to rise. Think about this. The SEALs didn't win because they were strong. They won because they were smarter under pressure. Nokia didn't lead because they were lucky. They led because they were willing to change. Sydney didn't survive because it had all the answers. It survived because people said, we're not quitting. That's resilience. That's the mindset you need when life doesn't care about your plans. And listen, this isn't theory. It's not hype. It's reality. It's what works. Let's get real. How do you build resilience? Here are some practical action steps you can start doing today. 1. Flip the script. When something hard hits, say this is teaching me something. That one sentence changes how your brain handles stress. 2. Stack the small wins. You don't need to climb the whole mountain. Just take one step, win the day. 3. Move your body. Physical momentum builds mental momentum. Go for a walk, hit the gym, punch a pillow if you have to. Just move. 4. Surround yourself with resilience. Talk to people who have been through stuff and kept going. Borrow their fire until you find your own. And hey, you're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to fall apart a bit. That doesn't make you weak. You know what makes you strong. Getting back up anyway. So let me say this, and I mean it. You're tougher than your past, stronger than your setbacks, smarter than your fear. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need to start. One step, one choice, one pivot. That's how Nokia rose. That's how Sydney stood firm. That's how those SEALs stole the night. You can do the same in your own life, on your own battlefield. Let's bring it all home. Mindset is the engine. Resilience is the wheels. Together, they take you places most people only dream of. Not because the road is smooth, but because you refuse to stop. So here's your call to action. Get up, dust off, pivot if you need to, but keep moving forward because your best chapter is waiting for you to write it. And I'll leave you with this. You don't need permission to be powerful. You don't need perfect timing to be ready. You just need to believe and begin. Let's go. You've got this.